They smiled at him, offered him a chair, and then started asking questions. Simple questions, or at least that's what they looked like. But by the time he walked out of that room, he realized something chilling. They weren't trying to know me. They were trying to control me. Because some questions are not meant to be answered. They're meant to expose you. And once you answer them, you don't lose the conversation. You lose power. We grow up believing that honesty is always the right answer. From childhood, we're told to speak the truth, to be open, to express ourselves without fear. It becomes a habit, almost automatic. Someone asks a question, and we feel an invisible pressure to respond, to explain, to reveal. It feels natural, even moral. But what we are rarely taught is that not every question is asked with good intention, and not every person deserves access to our truth. There is a quiet difference between honesty and exposure, and most people don't realize when they've crossed that line. Honesty is a value, something that builds trust in the right environment with the right people. Exposure, on the other hand, is when you give away pieces of yourself to those who have not earned it. It happens in subtle moments. A casual conversation, a seemingly harmless question, a friendly tone that lowers your guard. Before you even realize it, you've said more than you should have, and something inside you feels slightly off, like you've handed over something that cannot be taken back. The reality is, questions are not always neutral. Sometimes they are tools. Sometimes they are designed to dig, to test, to measure how much you're willing to reveal. And the person asking may not even appear threatening. They may smile, nod, and make you feel comfortable. That's what makes it so effective. Because the most dangerous questions are not the aggressive ones. They're the gentle ones that invite you to open up just enough to make yourself vulnerable. Think about how quickly people respond when asked about their weaknesses. There is often a pause, followed by a nervous attempt to sound honest but acceptable. In that moment, the mind is racing, trying to balance truth with image. But what is rarely questioned is why that information is being asked for in the first place. Is it truly to understand you, or is it to identify where you can be pressured, where you might break, where you are easiest to influence? Once that information is out, it no longer belongs to you. It becomes something others can interpret, judge, and potentially use. There is also a deeper psychological pull at play. Humans naturally seek connection, and one of the fastest ways to feel connected is by sharing something personal. When someone asks a question that feels slightly deeper than usual, it creates an opening. Answering it feels like building trust, like moving closer to understanding. But that feeling can be misleading. Not all connections are genuine, and not all curiosity is harmless. Sometimes, the desire to be understood leads people to reveal parts of themselves in environments that are not safe for that level of truth. In many situations, especially in professional or unfamiliar environments, questions are less about who you are and more about how you fit into someone else's expectations. Your answers are being observed, analyzed, and sometimes even tested for consistency. The more you reveal, the more material there is to evaluate you. And while that might sound normal on the surface, it becomes a problem when you start sharing things that should remain within your personal boundaries. There is a difference between presenting yourself and exposing your inner struggles to people who have no role in helping you carry them. There's also a quiet pressure that comes from silence. When a question is asked and you hesitate, the room often shifts. It can feel uncomfortable, like you're expected to fill the gap. That discomfort pushes many people to speak, even when their instinct tells them not to. They begin to justify their answers, to explain more than necessary, to avoid appearing evasive. But silence is not always a sign of weakness or guilt. Sometimes it is a form of awareness. It is the moment where you recognize that not everything needs to be said, that your thoughts and experiences are not public property. Another layer to this is the fear of being judged. People often answer questions honestly because they want to be seen as genuine, trustworthy, or likable. They believe that by revealing more, they are proving something positive about themselves. But the truth is, People will form opinions regardless. Sharing more does not guarantee understanding, and it certainly does not guarantee respect. In some cases, it does the opposite. It gives others more angles to interpret you, more reasons to question your decisions, and more ways to place you into a box that may not reflect who you truly are. There's a kind of quiet strength in holding back, in choosing your words carefully, in understanding that your experiences, your fears, and your thoughts have value. And anything that has value should not be given away freely. This doesn't mean becoming closed off or dishonest. It means being selective. It means recognizing that trust is something that is built over time, not something that is granted in a single conversation. It means understanding that just because someone asks a question does not mean they are entitled to an answer. In everyday life, this awareness can change the way you interact with people. You begin to notice patterns. The person who asks too many personal questions too quickly. The conversation that shifts from casual to intrusive without warning. The subtle feeling that something is being pulled out of you rather than shared naturally. These are moments where you pause, where you take a step back internally and decide what you are comfortable sharing. And sometimes, the most powerful response is a simple redirection, a neutral answer, or even a calm silence that does not apologize for existing. There is also peace in knowing that you do not owe anyone full access to who you are. Your story is yours, your struggles are yours, your thoughts are yours, and they deserve to be shared in spaces where they are respected, not analyzed for advantage. When you begin to see your words as something valuable rather than something automatic, your interactions change. You become more present, more intentional, and more in control of how you are perceived. Over time, this approach builds a different kind of confidence. It's not loud or performative. It's quiet and grounded. It comes from knowing that you are not easily influenced by pressure, that you do not speak just to fill silence, and that you are aware of the impact your words can have. It allows you to navigate conversations with clarity, to engage without overexposing, and to maintain a sense of self that is not shaped by every question thrown your way. And in that awareness, you begin to understand something important that most people overlook, that honesty is not about saying everything. It is about saying what is right in the right place to the right people at the right time. There is something people rarely realize until it's too late. Every piece of information you share about yourself has value. Not just emotional value, but strategic value. The way you think, what you fear, who you trust, what motivates you, these are not just harmless details. In the wrong hands, they become tools. And the moment you give them away freely, you lose control over how they are used. Most people don't see conversations this way. They see them as exchanges, as ways to connect, to relate, to pass time. And in the right setting, that's exactly what they are. But not every setting is safe, and not every person is neutral. Some people listen with curiosity, while others listen with intention. They are not just hearing your words, they are studying them, storing them, and sometimes waiting for the right moment to use them. It often begins innocently. Someone asks about your challenges and you open up about a difficult phase in your life. It feels relieving to talk about it, to be heard. In that moment, it doesn't feel like you're giving anything away. But what you've actually done is reveal how you respond under pressure, what affects your emotions, and where your breaking points might be. You've handed over a map, even if you didn't realize it. The same happens when people talk about their ambitions. Sharing goals can feel inspiring, like you're declaring your direction in life. But it also reveals what drives you, what you're willing to sacrifice, and what matters most to you. In a supportive environment, that kind of openness can lead to encouragement. In a competitive or uncertain environment, it can create opportunities for others to step in your path, to outmaneuver you, or to use your own desires against you. There's also the subtle danger of revealing relationships. When you talk about who you rely on, who influences you, or who stands by you, you're not just sharing names. You're exposing your support system. And once that system is visible, it becomes something others can approach, question, or even manipulate. What felt like a simple answer becomes a doorway into your personal world. What makes this even more complicated is that people don't always use information in obvious ways. It's rarely direct. It's quiet, gradual, and often disguised. A comment here, a reaction there, a decision that seems unrelated but is actually shaped by what they know about you. You might not even connect the dots until much later, when you realize that something you shared casually has somehow circled back into your life in a way you didn't expect. There is also a psychological effect that comes with sharing too much. The more you reveal, the more you feel exposed. And when you feel exposed, you start to lose a certain kind of inner stability. You begin to wonder how your words are being perceived, how they might be interpreted, whether they might come back to affect you. That quiet tension can shift the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, and even the way you make decisions. On the other hand, when you learn to hold back, something changes. You begin to feel more grounded, more in control. It's not about being secretive or distant. It's about being intentional. It's about understanding that your thoughts and experiences are not things to be distributed freely to anyone who asks. They are parts of you that deserve context, trust, and the right environment. There is a difference between connection and oversharing. Connection is built slowly, through mutual respect and consistent behavior. Oversharing happens quickly, often driven by emotion or the desire to be understood. And while it may feel good in the moment, it can create imbalances. When one person knows too much about the other, the dynamic shifts. It creates an uneven space where one side holds more awareness, more insight, and sometimes more influence. In many real-life situations, especially in professional or unfamiliar settings, this imbalance can have real consequences. Decisions are made based on perception, and perception is shaped by what people know about you. The more you reveal, the more variables you introduce into how you are seen. And not all of those variables work in your favor. Some may be misunderstood, some may be judged unfairly, and some may simply be taken out of context. It's also important to understand that not everyone who asks questions is doing so with bad intentions. Many people are simply curious, or trying to make conversation, or attempting to understand you better. But intention does not always determine impact. Even well-meaning questions can lead to answers that place you in a vulnerable position. That's why awareness matters more than assumption. Instead of focusing only on why someone is asking, it becomes more important to consider what your answer might lead to. There is strength in choosing what to share and what to keep. It's a quiet kind of discipline, one that requires you to pause before responding, to think beyond the moment, and to recognize the long-term effect of your words. It's not about building walls, but about creating boundaries. Boundaries that protect your sense of self, your dignity, and your ability to move through different environments without being easily influenced or defined by what you've revealed. Over time, this approach changes the way people perceive you. When you don't give away everything, there is a sense of depth, of control, of presence. People listen more carefully to what you do say because it carries weight. Your words are not constant or reactive, they are measured. And that in itself creates a form of respect that cannot be forced or demanded. It also gives you the ability to observe more. When you are not focused on revealing yourself, you begin to notice others more clearly. You see patterns in how they speak, what they ask, how they respond. You gain insight without giving away your own position. And that awareness becomes a kind of advantage, not over others, but in how you navigate situations, how you make decisions, and how you protect your own path. At its core, this is not about distrust or fear. It's about understanding value. Just as you would not give away something valuable without thought, you should not give away pieces of yourself without intention. Your experiences, your thoughts, your emotions, these are part of what makes you who you are. And they deserve to be treated with care, not handed out in moments of pressure or expectation. When you begin to see information this way, conversations change. You no longer feel obligated to answer everything. You no longer rush to fill silence. You no longer confuse openness with authenticity. Instead, you move with a sense of clarity, choosing your words with purpose, sharing in spaces that feel right, and holding back in spaces that do. And in doing so, you don't lose connection. You refine it, you don't lose honesty. You strengthen it, and most importantly, you don't give away your power. You learn how to keep it exactly where it belongs. There is a moment in every conversation where silence feels uncomfortable. It slips in unexpectedly, stretching just long enough to make you feel like you should say something, anything, to fill the gap. Most people rush to escape that moment. They speak quickly, sometimes without thinking, just to break the tension. But what they don't realize is that, in that very moment, they are giving away more than words. They are giving away control. Silence has always been misunderstood. It is often seen as awkward, as hesitation, as a lack of confidence. People associate it with not knowing what to say, with being unsure or unprepared. But in reality, silence can be something entirely different. It can be a decision, a deliberate pause, a sign that you are not reacting automatically, that you are choosing your response rather than being pulled into one. In a world that rewards quick answers and constant expression, choosing not to speak can feel unnatural. There is pressure to respond immediately, to show engagement, to prove that you are present and involved. And while responsiveness has its place, it can also become a weakness when it turns into impulsiveness. When every question receives an instant answer, there is no space for thought, no room for awareness, no protection against saying something that should have remained unspoken. Silence creates that space. It slows things down. It gives you a moment to observe not just the question, but the intention behind it. It allows you to notice tone, body language, timing, things that are often missed when you are focused only on replying. In that pause, you begin to see more clearly. You start to understand whether the question deserves a full answer, a partial one, or none at all. There is also a certain power in being unpredictable. When people expect you to answer everything quickly, your silence disrupts that expectation. It shifts the dynamic. Instead of you being the one responding, they become the ones waiting. And in that waiting, the balance changes. The conversation is no longer being driven by pressure on you to speak, but by their curiosity about what you might say next. This does not mean silence should be used to intimidate or manipulate. Its strength lies in its calmness, not in creating discomfort for others. It is about being steady within yourself, not reacting out of fear of how you might be perceived. When your silence comes from clarity rather than confusion, it carries a different kind of presence. It feels grounded, not empty. It communicates that you are thoughtful, not withdrawn. There are situations where speaking less reveals more strength than speaking often. In difficult conversations, for example, emotions can rise quickly. Words spoken in those moments are often driven by impulse rather than intention. Silence, in those situations, acts as a barrier between feeling and reaction. It gives you time to process, to understand what you are experiencing before turning it into language. And in doing so, it prevents you from saying things that may not truly represent what you think or who you are. Silence also protects you from unnecessary exposure. When you speak less, you reveal less. You give fewer details that can be misunderstood, fewer statements that can be taken out of context, fewer pieces of yourself that can be analyzed or judged. This does not mean becoming closed off or distant. It simply means recognizing that not every moment requires your input, and not every conversation requires your full transparency. There is a quiet confidence in being comfortable with silence. It shows that you do not rely on constant expression to validate your presence. You do not feel the need to fill every gap just to be seen or heard. You are secure enough to let moments pass without forcing them into something they do not need to be. And that kind of confidence is often felt more strongly than any words you could say. Over time, people begin to notice this. They may not be able to explain it directly, but they sense it. They see that you are not easily drawn into unnecessary Arabic alif, Arabic lam, Arabic kaf, Arabic lam, Arabic alif, Arabic meme. That you do not speak just for the sake of speaking. Your words become more intentional, more measured. And because of that, they carry more weight. When you do choose to speak, it feels like a decision, not a reaction. There is also an element of self-respect in silence. It reflects an understanding that your thoughts are valuable, that they should not be expressed carelessly or under pressure. It shows that you are not easily influenced by the expectations of others, that you do not feel obligated to respond just because someone is waiting. Instead, you respond because you have chosen to, because you believe it is the right moment and the right thing to say. In many ways, silence is a form of control. Not control over others, but control over yourself. It allows you to manage your reactions, your emotions, and your words. It keeps you from being pulled into conversations that do not serve you, from answering questions that do not deserve your honesty, from revealing parts of yourself that are not meant for that space. It gives you the ability to stay centered, even when the environment around you is pushing for a response. It also teaches patience. In silence, you learn to sit with your thoughts, to let them settle before turning them into speech. You become more aware of what you truly want to say, rather than what you feel pressured to say. And that awareness changes the quality of your communication. It becomes less about reacting and more about expressing something real, something considered. There is a misconception that being quiet means being passive. But silence, when used with awareness, is anything but passive. It is active in its restraint, active in its observation, active in its intention. It requires discipline to hold back when you feel the urge to speak, to remain calm when silence feels uncomfortable, to trust that not every moment needs to be filled. In relationships, in work, in everyday interactions, this approach can shift everything. You begin to listen more deeply, to understand more fully, to respond more thoughtfully. You become less reactive, less impulsive, less driven by the need to prove yourself through constant Arabic Khalif, Arabic lamb, Arabic calf, Arabic lamb, Arabic Khalif, Arabic me. And in that shift, you create a different kind of presence, one that is steady, aware, and difficult to unsettle. At its core, silence is not about saying nothing. It is about choosing when to say something. It is about recognizing that your voice has value. And that value increases when it is not used carelessly. It is about understanding that strength is not always loud, that confidence is not always expressive, and that sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is the one you decide not to say. And in that decision, you begin to move through conversations with a different kind of awareness, one where you are not controlled by the need to respond, but guided by the clarity to choose, where your presence is not defined by how much you speak, but by how deeply you understand, and where your silence is no longer seen as absence, but as a quiet form of strength that protects you without needing to explain itself. Disclaimer: this story is inspired by general ideas often associated with strategic thinking and human behavior, including themes found in classic works like The Prince. It is created for educational and entertainment purposes only. It does not encourage manipulation, dishonesty, or unethical behavior. Instead, it promotes self-awareness, thoughtful communication, and protecting one's dignity, values that align with both ethical principles and universal moral teachings.